detecting and classifying invasive plant species using AI and image classification through an autonomous drone. So a little bit of background about our presentation or our research. Invasive species are most commonly plants, and they've been proliferating around the United States very rapidly, and they're also very common, especially here in California. They reproduce very quickly when introduced, and their reproduction causes harm to surroundings, like surrounding ecosystems, surrounding urban planning, so all sorts of stuff. The government spends around $423 billion annually just to combat this problem. So our goal is to create an automated drone that will use a camera to take images of vegetation, and then the device will use image recognition software to analyze whether the captured or whether there is an invasive or native plant within the captured image. And so we're going to be using a large data set of images to train our software. So far, we have around, I'd say like 400 pictures of invasive plants. And if it's invasive, the drone will use a wireless transmitter and GPS to send back the specific coordinates of where the species was captured. And right now, we're only detecting one species of plant called the black mustard plant. And in the future, we're going to be working on other species, like this slide says. So we want to quickly identify the black mustard plant in an environment so we can remove it before it proliferates. For example, Coyote Hills Regional Park, they're doing a great job keeping invasive plants out of their park, but like if you visit there, you can see tiny sprouts of the black mustard plant growing. So with this drone, we can more effectively identify these areas where they're beginning to grow and remove them before they proliferate.
Our automated drone system is designed with a strong emphasis on reliability, safety, and efficiency to ensure it meets the high standards required by professionals working in the field. Given that the drone will operate in diverse wild environments, it must perform consistently and accurately. By focusing on these key areas, we aim to provide an effective tool that professionals can trust for effective monitoring and management of invasive species. So here are some of the materials that we are using. We're using a drone frame, a GPS to gather information about the location of the invasive plant so that we can report it to the proper authorities in order for it to be removed, a battery charger, a power module, a computer, Raspberry Pi, a receiver, a camera to take pictures of the captured invasive plant species, a flight controller, a radio controller, and a sensor. So a little bit more about our drone frame. So we're using the Holybro X500 V2 ARF kit, and it's a quadcopter. So we decided to use a quadcopter because it has simple assembly, it's modifiable, it's stable, durable, and it has a vertical takeoff and landing. And then a little bit more about our sensor. So we're using a LiDAR sensor, which stands for light detection and ranging sensor. And we are using this to detect the distance to the invasive plant species by emitting laser pulses. And doing this allows us to get a better understanding of the landscape that our drone is in. And then for software, we are using ArduPilot. And ArduPilot is an open source autopilot system, which we are using to configure a drone, which involves connecting the receiver with the radio controller, leveling the drone, ensuring that the compass and GPS are functional, testing the propellers, and setting up the radio controller switches for various functions like loitering and altitude hold. We also conducted the battery, established a fail-safe, and practiced arming and disarming the drone. Our next steps will focus on using Mission Planner, integrating a camera, and incorporating object avoidance.
Okay, so a little bit about the software for our actual object detection. Once again, our goal with this AI model is to detect invasive species from our drone data. So our drone will collect the data using its camera in video format, but using the specific frames, we'll be able to run the input through an image classification model. So the steps that we are taking in order to reach this goal is first collecting the training datasets of invasive species images, labeling the objects or the invasive species versus the native species, training and testing a custom object detection model using the Python TensorFlow library, and then finally running the model on our drone data. So a little bit into the specific steps and more details on that. The first step is, of course, collecting our actual training data. So originally, we wanted to be able to find some kind of large open source data set in order to train our model. However, because of the novelty of this project, it hasn't really been done before that someone would train a model specifically for the Brassica nigra or black mustard plant that we are focusing on. So because of that, we were not able to find any large compiled data sets through open source on the internet. So because of that, we decided to compile our own data set using images as that we found online, as well as some pictures that we took ourselves by going out into the local area. Because of the prevalence of the Brassica nigra plant, it is quite common around this area, making it easy for us to go out and take our own pictures in locations such as Coyote National Park. One benefit of collecting our own image data is that we were able to take a lot of pictures at once and also take the pictures from different angles that would mimic the way that the drone will be seeing the plant. So another way that we are creating our dataset is through data augmentation techniques. So data augmentation is a process in which we can create more data from what we have. We can do this through different techniques such as changing the brightness or the contrast of the image, rotating it, reflecting it, and just changing the overall orientation, as you can see in this image of an example with this cat picture that has been turned upside down or to the side. And that way we can, from one original image, we're able to get a lot more training data and also reduce overfitting, correct data imbalance, and improve the generalization of our model. So the next step is actually labeling whether the image contains the invasive species or not. So our original plan was to utilize a model that would require us to create bounding boxes around our image. So we were originally using existing software tools in order to do this. However, we quickly realized that it would not be very feasible due to the volume of our data, and also not necessary because we did decide to switch to a different kind of model that I'll discuss later. So instead of using this original plan, we decided to change it to just a traditional 2-column data. So we'll be able to label the image as either containing the invasive plant or not containing the invasive plant. The next step is then actually training and testing our model. So as I said before, we will be using the TensorFlow library, which is quite common in current technologies in order to train AI models, especially image classification, because it does utilize a convolutional neural network, or CNN, which is a type of machine learning model designed to recognize patterns in data, especially images. It works by using layers of filters called convolutions to automatically detect features like edges, shapes, or colors in an image. These features are then passed through layers that gradually combine them to recognize more complex patterns. In our case, the full plant. The convolution process allows the model to focus on details, while the pooling layers reduce the size of the data to make the network more efficient. Finally, fully connected layers make predictions based on the features to decide if the image is an invasive species or not. These still frame images from our drone footage will be run through the model to create this classification. And the image that's on the right shows a simple diagram of how CNNs work, starting with the input image, feature extraction through the different layers, and then finally the actual classification. So how will we actually measure the accuracy of our model? So TensorFlow does have some built-in features to report the performance, such as the evaluate method. Some other ways that we can measure the performance is using a confusion matrix. This creates a visual representation of the true positive, false negative, false positive, and true negative predictions or outputs. As you can see in this image, it kind of provides a visual so that we can further analyze the model's performance. And finally, we will run our drone footage through the model to evaluate its ability to detect the invasive species and report back the GPS location where it was found. So a bit on the current progress and our next steps. We have already completed our drone kit assembly, and we were actually able to get our drone flying recently, which is great. We also ordered our additional materials, including the accessories for the drone, and our initial round of data collection. As we said earlier, we have about 400 images currently. What we are currently working on is finishing building our drone, including adding the wire, or wiring the camera, the LiDAR sensor, GPS, and other elements that will really make our drone useful for our project, as well as gathering more training data so that the model can make as educated of a prediction as possible. In terms of near future steps, we have begun programming our model, but we will be continuing that, as well as implementing the actual autonomous drone flight. Here are our sources. We'd like to thank ASDRP and Dr. McMahon, as well as our other group members. Any questions?